Good. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on the part of the world where you're joining us from. Very welcome to this first conversation on learning continuity and innovative pedagogies. Before we begin, I would like to ask you in the audience to please keep your audio and your video off unless you are taking the floor. And also to identify, I see many of you have already, but to identify the chat function in this platform in Zoom, because we will be conducting a couple of surveys, and of course we would like to hear from you any questions or comments that you may have as we go on with the session. So please do feel free to introduce yourself, to say hello as you have in the chat, but also and importantly to share any questions or any comments as we move on in the session. So first of all, I would like to say, well, my name is Carlos Vargas, and I am the head of the section for teacher development at UNESCO, and I lead the secretariat of the International Task Force on Teachers for Education 2030. And on behalf of the three co-hosts of this event, the OECD, UNESCO, and the Teacher Task Force, it is my great pleasure to welcome you to the first conversation in a series of webinars we will be having throughout April, which are the fruit of an initiative which began in November last year and basically highlights the innovation, the creativity that teachers have displayed, and the efforts that they have made to sustain learning during the pandemic. As you're aware, with the onset of the COVID-19 last year and ensuing school closures that affected a large part of the planet, teachers overnight were asked to innovate their teaching in order to keep learning going. It's not surprising that teachers responded in countless exciting and creative ways to ensure that all of their students, regardless of their background or their settings, have access to quality learning opportunities. Now, at the end of last year, our three organizations came together to issue a call for teachers, for teacher educators, and for school leaders to submit videos and to show and tell their stories, to describe the innovative responses that they have developed as a response to COVID-19. So teachers, teacher trainers, school leaders were invited to share these innovations, the ones that they felt the most proud of, and the new forms of collaboration with their peers, also the lessons that they learned during the pandemic, and the future of their teaching. Most of the testimonies that we have received cover topics around four main topics. On the one hand, learning continuity, also social-emotional support, new instructional practices, and peer support as well. The conversations we're organizing over the next 3 weeks, I think, are an opportunity to hear from these teachers, to engage with peers, to learn from one another, and to continue reflecting on the changes that we need to see in pedagogies, but also in education systems, in school governance, for these innovations to continue to flourish. In this first webinar in particular, we will be speaking with teachers who sent us their stories about learning continuity and innovative practices. It is my pleasure to introduce today's panelists, and I would ask them to please turn on their videos so we can see their faces and know them in person, even though we've seen their videos, and we will be speaking about their innovations throughout this session. We have Mr. Thomas Harefa. He's from Indonesia and is currently vice principal and teaches English language arts for grades 9 to 11 in Sihanoukville, Cambodia. Welcome, Thomas.
Thank you for your welcome, Carlos.
Thank you very much. We also have Sandeepa Shavan. She is a primary years program coordinator and leads a team of PYP facilitators in Accra, in Ghana. Sandeepa, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for the opportunity and lovely to see all of you here. Thank you.
Wise. Thank you, Sandeepa. We also have Amit Basal. He's a learning coach in mathematics and coding for ages 9 to 14 and is based in Jaipur in Rajasthan, India. Amit, welcome.
Thank you so much, Carlos, for the introduction. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We will be having another school principal, Amita Sinilla, from the Maldives, but she has not joined us yet. She's probably busy teaching, and she will or might be able to join us later down the road. But we're also joined by Cindy Leafland. She is a practicing teacher from Suriname. She joined us from the Ministry of Education in Suriname, but she's also been a teacher leader at the Inter-American Teacher Education Network of the OAS. She has reviewed and provided comments to the videos, and we will be hearing also her takeout from the videos and from this conversation. So welcome, Cindy, and thank you for joining us too.
Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Cindy. And thank you all for joining this conversation. We are aiming for a panel discussion to be around 40 minutes. And then you are throughout the panel invited to write your questions in the chat that we will be able to address towards the end of the session. Please also feel free to share your comments. And as we go on, there will be a number of polls that my colleagues will be showing on the screen and that we will be doing using the chat function. So we would like for you to identify the chat function so that we can carry this on. So just to go back to the theme on learning continuity and innovative pedagogy, and to frame a little bit of the experiences that we will be hearing from today, let's just recall how learning has been transformed in the past year or so. I mean, education has been continuously changing and adapting to the context, but we have an unprecedented context ahead of us, and which has been marked by the pandemic, by school closures. So now the way we conceptualize education stretches well beyond the traditional boundaries of the classroom, as we have seen, and involves new actors as well. Around the world, students are learning in a new and diverse way. And this includes, as we said, new actors, parents and communities included, new settings, new formats, and new content that has become prominent. During the closure of schools, teachers have been at the heart of this transformation. Not only have they ensured the continuity of learning, but they have also enhanced and strengthened the engagement of learners despite the difficulties posed by distance education, by the digital divide, by the lack of access, by the very material conditions in which education takes place. So today we will hear from different teachers from around the globe about their experiences and innovations in ensuring that the continuity of learning and the sustainability of education, regardless of the challenges we've seen, and addressing these challenges in particular. Teachers have put students back at the center of the process. They have engaged with their learners in creative and enjoyable ways, proposing new teaching methods, promoting new activities and programs to ensure learning during the school's closures. So we are very happy to welcome the teachers that will be presenting this innovation and to learn from their experiences. Now, before we begin, we'd like to conduct one first poll. So I'm going to ask my colleagues to share the poll, and we would like to hear your views to get started. So let's see if we can see it. You probably can see it now on your screen. The question is, what have you found the greatest challenge in keeping learning going? Please choose one of these answers. According to you, what have been the greatest challenges in sustaining learning? So let's wait a couple of seconds and see if we have some answers to get started. Make sure you have your questions answered. We're going to give a couple of seconds more for your reflection. And let me see if we have the answers showing. There we go. So you can see now that most of the respondents found that assessing student learning was one of the biggest challenges. Now wait, it was actually encouraging participation, followed by assessing student learning. I think we will be listening to many experiences on particularly how to engage learners in education and in learning continuity. For that, let me turn to Amit first, Amit Basal from India. And let me ask you a question, Amit. You have combined computer coding with the teaching of mathematics to ensure learning continuity. What were some of the factors that you had to consider for this, and how did the experience go? Can you share with us in 3 minutes, please?
Thank you so much, Carlos, for your question. Before going ahead, I just want to give a sort of background. I am teaching in a government setup, in a government school in New Delhi, and majority of the people or majority of the students come from very low income background communities. Now, as a pandemic hit, these communities were the worst hit, and to make sure that my students will continue to learn, there are 3 factors which I consider. So first is I have to make sure that whether my students have they have the access of food, proper food, because of the lockdown, we have one in India, we have the toughest lockdown, and because of that, many parents lost their jobs. So first thing that I have to consider is that whether they have proper access of food. Why I'm saying so? Because the first thing that came in my mind is that a child with empty stomach cannot sit in front of a laptop or in front of a device for getting education or for learning anything. So that's the first thing. Second thing that I have to consider is their mental health status should be in that setup where they will be able to gain or grasp what teachers are delivering or what I am delivering. So regular counselings help me that. And the third and the most important thing is access of technology and internet, basically. So these are the 3 factors. Now, how that idea of coding merging with math came in my mind is I am from an engineering background, so I was exposed to coding before during my graduation, and during pandemic, coding was in India, especially the coding was at the boom. So there were many organizations who come up with the concept, okay, how can a child learn coding and all that. And I even mentioned in my video that a 20th century, like a teacher with a 20th century mindset cannot teach 21st century kids. And that's how the idea came, that why not I first explore that coding part, like how can I incorporate coding for students. So then there are so many free resources available on internet, and then when I explore it, I find it very interesting that okay, geometry is one of the subject which can be teach through coding, and then I sort of incorporate that, because it took me 3 months to provide access of technology to my kids, with the help of NGOs and with the help of government. And after making sure that okay, now my kids have the access of technology, then I start with the coding in the classes, which which will also engage them in the classes. So it's a new kind of concept for them also. So it will help me in continuing the learning for my students. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amit. We'll be going back to some questions, and also from the participants in the webinar that can type away the questions they might have about this innovation. Thank you very much, Amit. Let me turn now to Thomas Harefa from Indonesia. Thomas, you chose to emphasize student-centered learning in your methods to engage all students. What differences did this make to learners? What have you observed as a result of adapting your teaching to the pandemic? Please share your insights with us in 3 minutes.
Sure. Okay. So one of the things that I have to consider, number one, is the effect of the pandemic on the teachers, because what I could suddenly see and what I could suddenly pick up is that teachers are suddenly playing a different kind of game, right? And the attitudes have suddenly changed, and suddenly the required skills that are expected from parents and also from the administrator towards the teachers have completely flipped, right? Before, teachers are seen more as mentors in the school. Teachers are seen more as figures. But now as we turn to the computer, that relationship suddenly is just botched by this filter, right? And be it the internet, be it the amount of times you're sharing to your students, or the amount of time that you're saying to your students, hey guys, give me a moment, I think there's some technical difficulty. So the idea that the first thing that I have to consider for student-centered learning is for the teacher themselves. As a teacher, I discovered that with my own pain and with my own struggles, I developed these false accusations or these false ideas about the students, where now the students are at home, they're with their devices, things are more easier for them. For students, oh, they can do more activities, they have more time. Or, oh, the student is not responding, they are lazy, right? These are like really easy terms for us to catch over time, because in all honesty, the things that we see in other students, in our own little secret, are the things that we see in ourselves, right? And so one of the things that I had to tackle was not, the technology or the issues and all these flooding informations, from different sources telling me how to teach, but it's to first consider the student and to actually work with what I have. And this is what makes things work when it comes to my approach to, because throughout the time I realized that, these rumors, they're just excuses that I make by myself, and I'm not considering the student, right? So what do I have? I have the technology, okay? What do I have? I have, my students, all right? And what do I want? I want them to continue learning. So it was actually very easy to see the way that it's supposed to be, right? How do I, use Zoom? How do I use this, magical mirror in the internet to teach students in the same expectation that parents do too have to the teachers? And I'm going to tell you guys it's impossible, right? It's impossible, completely impossible. That's why I focus less on myself and focus more on the student. So one thing that I focused on is that, these students are at home, things might be easier. These are lies, right? More time, lazy. Oh, these students are more, they're smart in technology than we are. The thing that I had to admit is that I realized that I have to let students take ownership of their education. And this concludes into my decision to choose self-paced learning, which does not mean I give them a year and let them learn by themselves. No, that's like the ultimate self-paced learning. But it's more of I give them a time frame and I give them goals, I give them essential questions, and I give them routes where they can take. These routes where these questions could be when it comes to English literature. It could be maybe they want to approach a story from the setting. Maybe they want to approach a story from the characters. Maybe they want to talk about the plot, right? So I give them these accesses, but they still have the same resources, and I'm not doing anything technologically, backflipping. With what I have, I try to focus so much on the students, letting them figure things out. I model things first, of course, right? I model things first, what I expect. Of course, this is really important because, you can't just tell students what to do. Okay, I think we all figured this out in the first month of Zoom, right? We tell students what to do. Maybe they come out empty-handed, right? We got to show them what to do. But then once we show them what to do, we got to show them the different resources they can pick up. We got to let them express themselves. It could be as easy as using Google Slides. There are tools, there are free tools that we could utilize. But sometimes we focus so much on, the assessment or the goals, but we never really stop and question, is my student taking ownership of their own learning? So all in all, let me just conclude. I wanted to make sure that the students have their education. They feel like they're doing the work without giving them more stress, but giving them this platform where they can express themselves while also achieve the learning goals that we set throughout a specific time frame.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Thomas, for this contribution. So we've heard from Amit on ways about going beyond the curriculum. And I think it intersects with Thomas's innovation as well in listening to and knowing more from the learning needs, the wants, the aspirations of teachers, and providing them with autonomy to do so. Thank you very much, Thomas. Then I'm going to ask my colleague, we're going to try a waterfall poll. So I'm going to ask you all to open your chat function. We're going to ask you a question and we'd love to hear from your answers. But please, as I read the question, just make sure you only type the answer without pressing send. Do not press enter until I say go. All right, so please open your chat function. And then the question we'd like to ask you is, what is one thing that your students reacted to best in distance learning? What did learners react better to in distance education? So please type your response, but do not send it until I say go. So please do type your response. Is the one thing that your students reacted to best in distance learning. And on the count of 3, we will please send your responses. So 1, 2, 3, go. So we're seeing A lot of answers. Okay. So new content, videos is also a common response. Having a variety of resources, daily checking. Very good, very good. So we can continue to see if they pull together these responses, and I think we are all basically identifying in the diversity of activities, in the nature of these activities, probably different from traditional teaching, good responses to it. So thank you very much. Let me now turn to Sandeepa from Ghana. And Sandeepa, you introduced a ludic dimension to your teaching by means of quizzes, tongue twisters, and different games. Now, what is your advice for continuing to make sure that teaching is innovative, that it is exciting for students? You have 3 minutes, please.
Yeah, sure. So I feel if you want to have innovation in your teaching, you've got to think 3 things. Think of the students, think like the students, and think with the students. Teachers are leaders and learners. And you know that leadership is just like learning. It's a process. And 2 of the competencies of leadership is relationship building and business acumen. While these 2 competencies are different in other professions, in the teaching profession, they are so interconnected because teaching is a relationship business. So sometimes you hear a student saying that I had a very good math teacher in year 8. And the reason being, she knew her subject matter. Did that mean that the other teachers did not know the subject matter? No. It meant that this math teacher made it her business to know her students. So I come back to my first point. You think of your students. If you want something innovative to be in your class, you think of how your students would react to this particular engagement. You think of their interests. You think of their likes. They think of what they actually see. What are their the videos that they see, or the idols that they have, the songs that they hear. This is what you think of your students. Then you think like your students. If your students are 9-year-old students, you think like a 9-year-old. If they are teenagers, you think like a teenager. You think, if I was a 9-year-old child, what would I prefer? What would I enjoy? What would I feel like looking at? How would I feel by learning this? Because you think like your students. And the third is what even Thomas said, you think with your students. That is student agency. There's so much spoken about student being the center of learning, about personalized learning. So when you think with your students, they come up with great ideas as well. It can be informal talks that you have with your students. You know, how did you like it? Or what do you think I can improve on this? Can we do something better? Thomas spoke about ownership. I speak about voice and choice along with ownership. Let them have a voice in their learning. Let them choose what they would wish to learn. So that is also spoken a lot in most of the curriculums about student agency, getting the students to learn and enjoy what they wish to learn. It was, I think, Pablo Picasso who said, every child is an artist. And the problem is how to keep him an artist when he grows up. And I'm sure he never just spoke about virtual learning. He spoke about so many other forms of art, especially in the primary section. There's a lot of art integration in the learning. They love music, they love dance, they love dramatics. How can you incorporate art, music, dance, dramatics in your curriculum. And that's what you've got to think. So you think of your children, think like your children, and think with your students. That's my advice.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sandeepa. Very, very insightful and very inspiring indeed. I think it touches upon the issues around the means and the content, how the means can actually be very important as they are varied, as you've mentioned, in terms of bringing in the arts. People in the chat have mentioned poetry, they have mentioned music and recitals. So this is something that can continue to happen, and that probably should be encouraged to happen in keeping learners interested, along with listening to learners' voice. Let me turn now to Amina.
Recording in progress.
We have a, yeah, there we go. So just to, I would just like to ask if Amina is finally, she has arrived. Amina Sinia from the Maldives. Can you tell me whether you are in the...
I just had some trouble in getting connected.
Very good. Thank you very much for joining us, Amina. Just to remind our audience, Amina is joining us from the Maldives, from Sinuatul School. Amina, the reading program that you implemented was very ambitious. It was to read big books and to dream big as well. What has been the long-term effect of the program on your students and to the community? What do you recommend to teachers that want to create sustainable programs like this? Can you tell us in 3 minutes time?
Yeah, thank you very much. Actually, when we also had to close down the schools, and when we were not able to have any contact with our, especially our preschool kids, we have had a discussion on how to reach them. And we came up with this idea of reaching them through this reading program. And the main reason why we selected this read big books and dream big dreams is that we want let the young learners to enhance a love to reading. So with this program, we were able to have a great connection with our students, because it was us who read the book for them, and then we give them simple tasks based on their age category, and we let them do the work at home with their family. So it was really inspiring, and it was an exemplary work by our whole team. So we really loved it, and our students also really loved it. So at a time like this, when we had a lot of difficulty in reaching the students, and also as these young kids are being affected social as well as emotionally, we had a chance to help them to come out of that difficult situation. So that's how we did it. And we did it in our school, we recorded it. And the main reason why we selected the school was because they really missed the school. So even with these kind of through videos, we just want to let them know that they can be with us, with the school, and so the students really loved it.
Thank you very much, Amina, for sharing your experience. And I think we have heard from one more element in sustaining learning and in making it more exciting, with the involvement of families, with the involvement of the community, which is something that we have seen. I mean, different forms of involvement that is not only, the dealing with the learners at home because they are not going to school, but actually in interactive and educational activities such as reading. So thank you very much, Amina, for your participation. Now we're going to do another poll. So please, I would like to ask the audience to open your chat functions again and to enter the answer to this question. You'll see it in the chat, and also to type it, but just to send it when we say go. So the question is, what has been your greatest source of inspiration as you innovate in your teaching during the past year? So please type away your greatest source of inspiration for innovation in your teaching in the past year. So I'm going to count to 3 and we can send our responses. So 1, 2, and 3. Please send them. Let's see what we see. Okay. So a lot of literature looking into ICTs, looking into learners again, into their beliefs, into their aspirations. A lot of technological and ICTs sources as well. Learners, for the most part, students are inspiration in themselves and their needs. All right, thank you very much for that. We will take note of these comments and we will include in the report of the session. So thank you kindly for your participation. Now let me turn to Cindy Lieflang from Suriname, and just before I give her the floor, let me just tell you that as part of the Global Teacher Insights Initiative, the 3 organizations invited members of the Teacher Task Force to make comments on the innovations which are presented in the videos and that you just recently heard from in the voice of their innovators, of their authors. Now, I would like to thank the 3 organizations who had contributed to this topic. So the Inter-American Teacher Education Network of the OES, thank you. I see Rebecca in the audience as well. Annabelle from Belgium, and the Southeast Asian Ministers of Education Organization, SEMIO, for their contributions. Thank you very much. Now, Cindy, first of all, thank you for reviewing the videos. And in your review, you commented that policymakers and teachers need to collaborate in order to accomplish lasting educational changes. Now, what changes do you think need to take place for policymakers to better support teachers, for learning continuity, for innovation? What needs to change in education systems? And what do you think that teachers can do to get more involved in policy discussions? Cindy, please.
Yes, thank you, Carlos. You can hear me?
We can hear you well.
A lot of changes are more top-bottom approaches, and what we see happening now is that a lot of teachers want to be involved in educational changes and even started to implement changes without the knowledge of policymakers. This indicates that the top is not meeting the needs of teachers by excluding the practical approach to the teacher. Policymakers must realize that education is not a ballast for the government budget asset. They do not realize that education and economy are very much related to one another. If low and middle income countries want to improve their income, they have to dare to invest in education of all levels. Governments must invest in teachers to keep on producing the much needed workforce. Durable innovations in education calls for effective leaders who do not see themselves mainly in the formal top-down approach, but also as leaders that can have a positive impact on the spreading of change. The focus should be on those involved who can work on a lasting educational change, such as teachers and the community, to make sure that there is a support base and carrying capacity for educational change to make sure there is sustainability. One of my professors once asked us why we wanted to change the educational system when we are clearly a product of the same education. There is nothing wrong with us after all. We made it. Of course, this is a trick question. We can hardly remember that as students, we also had to adjust to educational changes that were necessary at the time. And if we hardly can remember them, maybe our teachers did a good job. Without undergoing necessary changes, education would not be relevant today. We do face other challenges, but what would strengthen us is that those who educated us clearly made an effort. And now is our turn as policymakers, educators, the community to keep investing in the next generation. Policymakers should give school leaders more autonomy to try out their own innovations and that of their teachers. The Ministry of Education could also have a department of educational innovation to oversee the innovations, which will produce much needed data about what works and what doesn't. Teacher leaders can then use the clusters in their region to not only discuss what is wrong with the system and what challenges they are facing every single day, but also to discuss best practices within their school. If there is a teacher who successfully comes up with an innovation, let us recognize the importance of this. Thomas Harifa, Sandeepa Chavan, Amit Basal, and Sinu Atol School have shown great courage in their undertaking to innovate. Their work inspires us as teachers and shows us more than ever how relevant we are during this pandemic. Their voices are heard today, not only nationally, but also internationally, and are opening doors for discussions with policymakers to adopt changes that were made by teachers. For the school leaders to have a voice in educational innovation, they must be able to give recognition to an innovative teacher without the fear of being called back on their decision. So when they have a meeting with policymakers, these school leaders will definitely have something to contribute. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Cindy. Thank you very much for your comments. I think we can draw quite a few recommendations from what you have mentioned in terms of the policy implications, the implications to funding, to the investment that is needed to foster creativity and innovation, to capture and discuss best practices. So that immediately makes us think of continuous professional development, of communities of practice, of this kind of initiatives that take time and that the time needs to be made by the use of resources, and also by possibly changing accountability regimes that constrain the creativity, the agency that teachers have to adapt, to innovate. So thank you very much, Cindy, for those comments. And now I would like to turn to some of the questions that we have received. It's quite a lot of them, so we will obviously not be able to address them all. But I would like to ask our panel a question. Maybe we will have time for one question or two. But one that has been reiterated in the chat has to do with the use of cameras and engagement. I mean, to what extent do we understand the engagement of learners if they turn on their camera or if they keep it off? Is this an indicator of engagement? Can we think of other indicators of engagement? What strategies are there for learners to participate in class, to be present, to have their camera on? So that is something that we saw in many of the questions that we received. So basically, if I would have 1 minute from each of you to engage on the question of the devices, how they can be the solution, how they can be probably a constraint because of a screen time. So let me begin with you, Cindy. Can you, in a minute, give us a couple of insights as to engagement, devices, and screens?
Can you repeat the last part, please?
Yes, indeed. It was a question about how to engage learners to have their cameras on or to use their devices to engage in education.
Yes, thank you for the question. It's very challenging. I understand. I think we have the same problem here in Suriname. For one thing that I learned for us is more internet connection. So one of the things we also talked about is what you should find out if it's because of internet connectivity. but also students might be very uncomfortable with their home situation. And if there are more people, more family members in the background. I think for us, talking from my perspective, I am not very uncomfortable with students having their camera off if you could find out why they have their camera off in the first place. And if there is maybe a moment where they really need to have the camera on, you could have an activity that you could where you could engage them in keeping their camera on for that moment, because of course it's very uncomfortable when you look at the screen and you can't see anyone. So actually the challenges for us is not so much for the students. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Cindy. Amina, could you share your reflection in a minute?
Yeah, thank you. We too have the same difficulty and the challenge. And most of the time the students have their cameras off. And personally, I do not believe it's an issue, because when we talk about the participation of the students and engagement of the students, it does not matter whether you have your camera on or whether you have your camera off. When they are actively engaged in the lesson, when they can contribute it, even when their mic is on, or even through using by using other apps, when the interaction happens, it does not matter. So I believe it's not an issue, because as the other participant panelists just mentioned, that we understand the difficulty many students have, and it affects even sometimes even the level of the confidence the students have also varies from student to student. So I believe it's not an issue. And at the same time, because of internet connectivity, we have difficulty in even having the cameras on. So, but as long as the student engagement occurs, it does not matter to me whether they have their camera on or off. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Amina. Sandeepa, your views in a minute?
Yes, sure. I think this Zoom fatigue is being talked about as soon as students went on, virtual learning. So I feel a school has to collaborate with the teachers and find a short time where the students can be on Zoom with their cameras on, but have a chunk of time where they do independent learning, where they do activities and they could just come and submit it. So it actually depends on the school if they collaboratively decide with the team saying that, okay, today we have a PE session on Zoom and it's live, but I will not give them a math session. In fact, I would give them a session which they can do independently. So if you really break your time of, and with the needs of the students, I think it works wonderfully.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sandeepa. Indeed, I agree. Now, Thomas, student-centered learning or computer-centered learning?
Is that I have to pick one of them?
Yeah, you're two on screens and devices.
Student-centered learning, of course. When it comes to cameras on Zoom, I just like to remind everyone that if we believe that hearing is not listening, appearing in front of a camera does not equal to student engagement. So I think we have to reconstruct our understanding of engagement right there, and and we also have to anticipate. I really love, Sandeepa, you brought it up, right? There are studies on Zoom fatigue, because it has to do a lot with their mental health. So the students may be, they may be shy about their living space. They may be, their family might be shouting across the hallway while they're having their Zoom meetings. But we also have to consider different modes of communication. And one thing that I've done is, Zoom chat is okay, right? But the question is, how are we creating a platform for students to engage? So if we're just creating a platform where students just open up the camera and our expectation is them to be able to be seen, then of course the conversation ends there. The judgment ends there. But if we are looking from different modes of communication, since when did video calls replace voice calls, right? Voice calls are still as meaningful, right? People can still emulate, their deepest desires through their voice. So what's stopping us sometimes, as educators, in English, there are different modes of communicating, right? There's writing, there's speaking, right? So we have to explore, and I really agree too that we have to align too as a institution, so that we're not just having students enter a semester-long conference where they have to appear every single class, right? That is a bad idea, in my own opinion. But we have to give them personal space. We have to understand what they're going through. And again, it goes back to just listening to the students.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much, Thomas. And last but not least, Amit. Computer coding and mathematics, a lot of technology. What's your view on engaging learners by different means and your experience with it?
Yeah. So what I believe, as other panelists also mentioned, that by just turning on the camera is not only one of the way to gauge that whether students are engaged or not. Definitely there are other ways also. Like one of the ways is how can we make our lessons in such a way that students will be constantly engaging with the teacher through chat or by just turning on their mics and just interacting with the teacher. Also, there are so many applications, so many apps, so many websites are available where you can just ask students, okay, I'm just giving you this work, can you just upload it after the class? Or as I talk about coding, so in the coding also, I can easily evaluate or I can easily check, okay, whether my student actually solve those puzzles or not. So I think technology can play a very big role here. So by just turning on camera is not only one way, there are many other ways. And also one more thing I want to highlight, can we build such a relationship with our kids or with our students so that those who can turn on their cameras, they actually turn on their cameras without any hesitation. So can we convey this to our students that I am not teacher here, I am your friend. So can you talk to me like a friend? I'm not a teacher here, I'm your friend. So I think if we convey that, I think that will be that will help the student and the teacher to engage in the classrooms.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Amit, and thank you all for your responses. And all of the responses in the chat as well, they point to the very issues that you have brought forth. The issue of the means and the ends of education being different. At the end of the day, the issue around socialization, it was mentioned often, the relational and collective nature of learning is something that happens, and the means can be different in that purpose. Not to obliterate also, as has been expressed in the chat, that there's issues with connectivity, with bandwidth in different areas. There is a digital divide as well, and that the formats for participation and for relationship building can be varied. It can be ICTs, it can be with or without screens. It has been also mentioned in the chat, but it can also be in terms of all technologies, in terms of the radio, the television, the school packages, the educational packages, that are sent back and forth. I agree with you all that it has to do with the way we set the framework for participation and we build the relationship with learners. So thank you very much to all of you, and thank you very much to all of you in the chat. We have but a couple of minutes, but we would like to hear from you Again, my colleagues will put up a poll, and please answer as quickly as you can. It's a multiple option one. And the question is, let's see if we have it there. What have you changed the most in your teaching during this past year? Select your top 2 choices. What is it that you have changed the most in your teaching during the past year? So please go ahead and answer the poll. In a few seconds, we should be having the answer. So please go ahead and answer the question. What is it that you have changed the most in your teaching during the past year? And while we get the answer, I would like to thank all the teachers that participated in the Global Teachers Insight Initiative. Today, we have a few examples of those videos, but there have been many other videos that have been submitted, and I know many of you are present in this conversation. So apart from our the teachers that presented today their innovations, we would like to thank you for your participation. We believe this kind of dialogue is important, not only to recognize and to celebrate teachers' achievements, but also to highlight the importance of this to policymakers. So let me see if we get, there we go. We have the answers. Managing online learning environments. So speaking of the devil, speaking of this online and technological means, 45%. And I think it is followed by socio-emotional support. Giving socio-emotional support was the second most difficult chore to do during the pandemic and school closures. Do bear in mind that we will be touching upon the issue of socio-emotional learning in the next webinar. So we invite you to be attentive and to connect and participate in these conversations. And we also welcome your feedback on the campaign and on this conversation. Just after I close this session, please stay online for a minute, as we will share a slide with links and contact emails of the 3 organizations that you can actually contact to. We also encourage you to visit the links to the videos which are in the chat. They have been shared throughout, to engage in watching and commenting on the videos there, and to sign up for the next conversation on teaching this time next week, next Thursday, I believe it is. So with that, I would just like to thank you all, and especially to thank you, Amit, Thomas, Sandeepa, Amina, and Cindy, for the insights that you were able to share and to inspire so many answers in the chat that we have received. Thank you very much to you all, and have a good afternoon, good evening, wherever it is that you are. We look forward to hearing from you soon. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very
Bye.
much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Stay safe.